Live Impact News. We are starting you off with some live images right now at Charlotte Douglas International Airport as we are watching the flight situation around the nation. Day 7 of the government shutdown, and we are starting to see some issues with air traffic controllers, staffing, and that is having kind of a ripple effect we're seeing with the ability to get flights off in the correct time and appropriate time as scheduled. So with that, we want to get the very latest on the situation. We have Ivan Rodriguez who's joining us right now. Ivan, you've been monitoring the situation around the nation. What are we seeing as far as impacts from this federal government shutdown on how folks have been able to travel and get around the country by air?
Well, Vanessa, the government shutdown is not just a Washington problem. It's now landing at airports across the country. The Department of Transportation says more than 13,000 air traffic controllers are expected to continue working through the government shutdown, but without pay. Some are starting to not show up. With the government shutdown sliding into its 7th day, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says air traffic controllers are wondering if there's an end in sight.
They're thinking about, am I going to get a paycheck?
Controllers are considered essential workers, so they must work during the shutdown, but are not being paid.
We want to make sure we have air travel safe and controllers focused, not on their mortgages, not on the next paycheck, not on food on the table, but actually on making sure you and your family are safe. 12
FAA facilities saw staffing shortages Monday night. The control towers in Burbank, Phoenix, and Denver had so-called staffing triggers reported in the public FAA operations plan. Other facilities that handle air traffic around airports in Newark, New Jersey, Jacksonville, Florida, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Indianapolis also were short-staffed, which in some cases caused hours-long delays.
If we have additional sick calls, we will reduce the flow consistent with a rate that's safe for the American people.
Former air traffic controller Harvey Skolnick says anytime a facility isn't staffed properly, it has a ripple effect.
It has an effect on breaks. It has an effect on controllers getting time off. It has an effect on training. And the job is tough enough as it is. And when you have to work 6 days a week, and now you're not getting paid on time, so everything has a cumulative effect on the FAA.
The FAA is expecting short staffing at some facilities across the country today, according to its operations plan. Chicago O'Hare's air traffic control tower will be short staffed until midnight. Other facilities with short staffing include Nashville, Houston, Newark, Las Vegas, and flights in the Boston area. Vanessa?
Yeah, Ivan, this is an interesting situation when you consider like some of these air traffic controllers who are working without pay. I mean, do you have any response from the National Air Traffic Controllers Association? How are they, reflecting and remarking on things right now?
NATCA says the problems highlight a decades-long staffing shortage. The union's president says he wants to see the shutdown come to an end as soon as possible so the FAA and aviation safety professionals can focus on their vital work. He also says the union does not support any federal employees participating or endorsing activities that affect the national airspace.
Now, there's another layer here to this, the fact that smaller airports are set to lose these government subsidies for the flights to smaller cities. What are you seeing as far as impacts from that?
Yeah, and that's called the Essential Air Service. It provides funding for airlines to fly to those small cities that might otherwise not receive that air service, and that'll expire on Sunday. The Department of Transportation says that the main state that uses that is Alaska, where air travel is crucial. But again, a lot of these airlines will continue flying that in the immediate future. If longer this shutdown goes on, though, they might have to stop.
Yeah, wow. All right, Ivan, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you getting us an update on everything, kind of big picture around the nation when it comes to air travel. We appreciate it. Thanks. Folks, here on WCNC Plus Live Impact News here, we of course will keep you updated with the very latest. You heard Ivan talking about some specific airports that have been impacted. We actually have a look here at, kind of a visual of kind of painting the picture of what we're seeing. So some of those airports have been called out. Our producer, James Brierton, has prepared some visuals for us here regarding that. So yeah,
we're looking at flight tracking information, Vanessa, and this right now is from FAA.gov. So just like you were hearing, airports like Chicago are citing staffing reasons for ground delays. Nashville being one of those as well too, where delays were upwards of 2 hours. Dallas adding on to this list in the last little bit here, saying that due to staffing, they have average delays of 30 minutes. And these things all have trickle-down effects. So just looking at Memphis, Tennessee, for example, Vanessa, and right now we're looking at flights between Memphis and Charlotte, you can see that while some of these flights did manage to arrive on time, we have seen some delayed flights today when we look at flight tracking websites such as flightaware.com. And some of these have been improving. When we looked at this in the 5-6 o'clock hour in the height of Memphis's slowdown, we saw even more delayed flights. Some of them seemed like they were able to kind of make up for lost time, but we're still looking at 1 or 2 delayed flights, even some delays as you look ahead to tomorrow, as I think the airlines are anticipating the spillover effect for this, because FlightAware's website has this misery map that shows you not only weather and weather-related impacts, but airports that are experiencing delays and cancellations. So anytime you have a plane that's moving between one of these air centers with staffing and with restrictions, that could trickle down to where that plane is not only going next, but where it's going after that, and so on and so forth. So it's possible, Vanessa, that these things could kind of be domino effects.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think too, how the shortages are kind of coming and going from different airports. So it's been kind of an interesting track on them in the sense that, James, this time yesterday we were tracking Hollywood Burbank. And there was a period of time where they were actually saying from, I believe it was around 7 o'clock Eastern time, so our time, but in Pacific time that'd be different. But from 7 p.m. until I want to say it was either 1 or 2 in the morning Eastern time, they were going to have nobody in the air traffic control tower. So
yeah, they call that ATS 0, which is just to say there's no air traffic control staff in that tower. And in those scenarios, there's a couple of different tactics that they can deploy. They can shut down the airspace or the airport. They can throttle it and kind of limit the operations to kind of slow things down. Or, and they did a little bit of this, they can use remote air traffic controllers from other regions. So maybe elsewhere in California, for example, here's a live look at Los Angeles International Airport. And that just creates more work on an already strained system.
Well, and that's what they did, that third option that you mentioned, James, that's what they did in that case. We're told they actually used crews from San Diego to try to fill that gap. But to your point, they did have to throttle the flights, and so they were kind of uncertain how many they were going to get off the ground and have land according to what they had planned for that day. But they kind of try to manage as best as possible. Really, it's kind of what we're seeing around the nation for these specific airports. And I know we keep showing the live look at Charlotte Douglas. I mean, this is, seemingly an airport that has been spared, at least for now, from this. We haven't seen, since the shutdown started, any reports of concerns at CLT, at least not directly. And I know you kind of pointed to that and alluded to that a second ago.
And I was just trying to Google to see if the FAA had changed anything for Charlotte, and I don't see anything changes for Charlotte, but I do want to show this real fast. So this is another FAA website. This is different, Vanessa, than when I looked at it less than 2 hours ago. You see where it says terminal planned and en route planned? There's a lot of ground stop possible listed after those morning hours tomorrow that those were not there before, and they're listed under forecasted events. Now, we could go through each one of these and try to figure out why. Some of them might be weather-related, but I'm sure staffing would also be a contributing factor.
Yeah, and some of these are, from what I can tell, well, I mean, there's the Boston one where we know that there have been issues with the
Boston
staffing.
is showing up live tonight as having 2 related problems. One of them is that they have closed their airport to any non-scheduled general aviation aircraft. So if you own a private plane and you don't normally operate out of Boston, the airport's not open to you, but that doesn't really affect most of us who are flying commercial. But they also do have a ground delay at Boston right now, about 55 minutes due to runway construction. So that is another thing, right? Whereas you have crews and stuff working on airports, these things could trickle down. But I also did notice that on this list is Newark, and we know Newark is one of those airports that has been in the news for months now.
Yeah. Now, the other interesting layer here is, when we've been speaking of the shutdown in general, within the historical context of, recent years, we've of course mentioned the last government shutdown, which was in 2018, 2019, and that one lasting, I believe it was 30 plus days. One of the key reasons why then President Trump in his first term decided to end the shutdown was because of air traffic controllers calling out. It was the absenteeism. And I know travel is important for many reasons. There's the other element here where you also have, federal operations that shut down. So any sort of workers who might be traveling, federal workers who might be traveling for work-related purposes, that would cease. There could be a lot of money that is potentially lost to the aviation industry because of this shutdown in different ways now.
Yeah, I was just taking a closer look at these FAA anticipation or possible ground delays, which is when they kind of go to that throttle option. And you can see staffing is a contributing factor in several of the airspaces, Philadelphia and Dallas among them. I think some of these other ones, and I'd have to peer into them more closely, but we also have to remember that there's kind of like this stacking that happens, right? You have like air traffic controllers in Charlotte, for example, and then they kind of hand you off to the region, and then they hand you off to other regions. So there's a lot of layers of air traffic controllers. It's not just at the airports.
Yeah. Certainly something to watch, folks, as the days tick on here. As we mentioned, day 7 of the federal government shutdown. This is just one of the impacts. We've talked about so many here on WCNC Plus, including specifically here for the Carolinas, the fact that you've got national parks and attractions that are operated by the national park system, like the Blue Ridge Parkway, that are all kind of, questionable. We literally just had a story today from Smoky Mountains National Park where you've got other entities that are essentially paying for workers to continue to work at these parks. But once Friday comes, I believe it looks like that starts to get questionable. It's really the payment that we're seeing from these other entities only lasting for a week, after which, if the shutdown persists, there could actually start to be some closures, at least at that park.